I'm going to start the recording.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to go back with episode 2 here, I guess. We're going to start doing a bi-weekly show here. Me and Mark talked to him a couple weeks ago. Got a good vibe going on. I like our feng shui, so we're going to keep doing a weekly show, bi-weekly show on conspiracies and catch up on movies and do whatever topics we think of or people think of for the week, like trending topics, or we'll play with it by ear, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What you got to talk about this week?
Well, sort of touching on the topics that we didn't get recorded last time. I think it's important to sort of get back to some of those topics. We were talking about like geoengineering and weather modification. People seem to think that it's a giant conspiracy theory when it seems pretty obvious that
Cut and dry. A lot of
yeah,
the stuff that people say, "Oh, that's just a conspiracy," it's been already like declassified, as it's already
yeah.
been.
Oh,
Yeah. So
I mean, Dubai came out like a year ago and said, yeah, we're using weather modification for rain,
have you
and
seen the
people are
cloud
like,
makers? They can make like clouds that look like animals and make like the same one over and over and over again.
I mean, that's to me is that's crazy. Like,
Yeah, they can pump
that
out clouds, like legitimately.
which is weird. I mean, it's like, do we really need our clouds to look like animals? Like, is that really?
Balloon animals in the sky.
Well, I mean, I'm not in kindergarten anymore, so when I look at the clouds, it's not like I'm not like, ooh, look at the clouds.
I do. I look at the clouds all the time. I'm always trying to find things in the sky.
I
So
mean, it's interesting. They're interesting to look at. And I like some cloud formations and whatnot, but I
sometimes
think
they
people don't.
actually look like somebody sculpted a cloud from like a human head. I see all kinds of heads all the time and faces and like I'll see a lot of like heads blowing smoke rings and or like just weird things that you're like, there's no way that that's just normal. I see, like, if you look up more often, I promise you, if you look at the clouds, you will say, there's no way that's natural. Like, that just happened by accident. Whether it be the government and or the gods, something created some of these images that I'm seeing. You get what I'm saying? Like, and that goes
Yeah,
back to what we were saying, like, they can't like completely control the weather. They modify it, but what we were saying about how they mimic God, like they do it with everything, numerology, the weather. They tried anything that God has done in creation. I think the elites try to mimic or mock and alter. Yeah.
yeah. I think that is their. I mean, because they believe that they're these divine rulers, and they've gone so far that now that they believe that they're gods. They believe that through bloodlines and such. They believe they're descendants from gods or godlike creatures, and they have this divine right to rule over us.
See, I think that we're all like extensions of God. Now, there's no difference between them or us. Like, we're all creators here, and
Yeah, and I think that's where their ego just gets in the way of it. Like it's like, well, we hold all the secrets of of man, so we can use those against them and rule over them. Um, like people get really upset sometimes when they see a swastika, but if you look at the history of the swastika, it was used for thousands of years as a Buddhist symbol, right? There's a Buddhist temple in Toronto that I used to walk past all the time, and if you look at the main gate, it's along the top and the bottom of the gate. There's a swastika symbols, right?
mhm.
So anyone who is ignorant of that fact would think that there's something malicious
and
going on.
and
But
but the thing is, like, people have a short-term memory, and they're their memory of the
Yeah.
swastika, right, is with like white supremacist nationalism in America, West Coast America, back in like American. What's that movie with Edward Norton? You know, those times, the 80s, 90s era. You know, skinheads, and but that was a niche area, and really Nazism had nothing to do with that kind of white hate group anyway. Um,
Yeah.
and really, in reality, they're really not the same thing. And then when they adopted that Nazi symbol, I think a lot of groups start out like with a good idea or intention, and then they get infiltrated, and then it gets like BLM was originally a good idea, and then they were like, oh, we can't have that be a good thing. Let's cause riots, and then they take that Illuminati money or whatever you want, the cabal money, and throw it into the BLM, and boom, they're throwing bricks through buildings. Yeah.
I think a lot of, again, like even the concept, some of the concepts behind communism were conceived out of like, yeah, power to the workers, and workers of the world unite. But these ideologies become hijacked by people that are completely psychotic, and they just use it for nefarious purposes, like,
So,
so
weather modification. I want to get too sidetracked. Let's try to stay on the. I sidetracked just a
sure.
little bit. So
Well,
I had my experience with the tornado. I told you about that. It was like years ago. It was kind of when I was first waking up to chemtrails, and I walked outside, and my whole sky was lined up like line after line as far as I could see. And then on the radio, like earlier that morning, I heard them predicting a tornado for like the middle of the night the next morning. It ended up going down the highway of Columbia, Mississippi to Hattiesburg, and it killed like 4 people. And they predicted this could be like really bad, and they put it on, like, predicted this terrible tornado that's in Mississippi, and of all places. And yeah, and that just sunk in my head, and it's never went away.
well,
And
to what we were just saying before this, I think weather modification and weather prediction was conceived as a good idea, right? Like the people wanted to use it to help predict things like tornadoes in advance or hurricanes, and try, but again, it was manipulated and hijacked by people who are insane and want to use it for nefarious purposes. Um, geoengineering, again, like, everything is a balance. And when it comes to the weather, it's a very delicate balance. I think, you know, being able to predict the weather. I mean, most people can tell. Oh, it looks like it's going to rain, or it feels like it's going to rain, and most of the time they're right, just because they can feel it in the air. They've experienced that similar sensation before, without any sort of scientific, background.
that's a
It's just
natural feeling when you can feel
exactly
like
that's
certain things, and and then you can tell when it's also unnatural when you're like, oh, it's gonna rain in a couple of days because they just sprayed the shit out of the sky, like.
yeah, absolutely.
So you can definitely tell the natural feeling comes from like you waking up and you can just smell like the cold crispness and static electricity in the air. You're like, oh, fall's here, and then that's a natural feeling. But then you get a good big rain that comes after they spray the sky, and then you're like nastily sick for the next 3-4 days. Like, what is this?
Well, they're predicting, out where I am in Saskatchewan, they're predicting like 70 km/h winds over the next couple of days. Now, it does get really windy out here. In fact, um, this summer there's a couple times where the wind, like, I couldn't have fires in the back because it was just too windy,
Hmm.
and I didn't want to risk it. So, but the winters tend to get like very, very cold and very windy. So -40 becomes -50 plus with the wind chill, right? Um, so needless to say, I'm sealing up I'm putting caulking in every possible spot that I can, and insulating, putting extra insulation in, this for this winter. I don't know what to expect. It'll be my first winter here, but we had a pretty. I mean, when I got here, the grass was nice and green and lush, and over the summer we just had this sort of drought, and it didn't rain for weeks, and now the grass is basically dead. Like it's all dried, it's brown, and I don't believe in watering my lawn. I just I'm not gonna go out and try and water my lawn and make it look, or put like pesticides and things on it and stuff like that. Whatever happens, happens, right? But um, a huge change within the matter of about just a month and a half. I bought a nice lawnmower and I've only got to use it once because just the grass isn't growing. So I don't know how much of that has to do with the weather patterns. Again, out here it's pretty obvious. You can see um, the chemtrails a mile away, and whatever weather modification they're using, it's pretty noticeable here. It's simply because they're on the plains, right? So there's really nothing as far as the eye can see in any direction. Um, but the weather modification stuff has been, like in practice they've been doing this for more than 60 years, like 60 years basically, on a massive scale.
What was the first time you had seen something or heard something about it being really
Well, I was working down on Queen West in Toronto at a little bakery, and it was right next to an art gallery. And in the window of the art gallery, when I was out sweeping up, and I saw this exhibit where there was just like pictures, little pictures, and next to each other, and it was just these lines in the sky. And I went and asked, on my break, I went and asked them. I said, "So what's this about? Like, what are those pictures of?" She's like, "Oh, you don't know about chemtrails?" And I was just like, "Okay, I've seen that in the sky before, but what is that?" So we got talking. That was back in, I think, 2000. It would have been 2006, 2005. So that's when I started to look into it, and shortly after, around 2009, 9 or 10, I started reading more into geoengineering and finding out more about it and how it's used to modify the weather. So that's, and then I found those videos shortly after of JFK in 1961 talking to the UN General Assembly about weather modification, weather control, and weather prediction. And then the video a year later, 1962, where Lyndon Johnson was giving a speech at the graduating class at the University of Texas about, weather satellites that would predict weather and eventually control the weather. And he who controls the weather will control the world. And
Jeez.
it's like, yeah, I know. It's pretty. I mean,
If I heard some stuff like that, it would scare me. Like,
it is. I mean, he was a political animal. Like that guy was a monster. I mean,
we got the Lyndon B. Johnson Freeway here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They love him down there. I mean,
Yep.
I mean, he was implicated in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. I mean, who had more to benefit directly than the vice president. I don't think he was the sole instigator of it, but I mean, there's so many theories, obviously.
What about the theory of JFK and Jimmy Carter? What do you think about that one? They look a lot alike. Have you heard this one?
Well, yeah, and I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so, because I don't think that Jimmy Carter. Um,
A lot of similar values.
I think so, but I don't think
Mm.
Jimmy Carter lived up to JFK's sort of stature.
But would he? Would he if he was playing a different character?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. I think.
Is Alex Jones and Bill Hicks the same guy?
I don't know. That's weird.
One's
I mean,
kind of liberal and one's kind of Republican.
well, I think
The times have changed too. The times have changed, and so
yeah, and I also think that like we were saying in the last video, like as far as I'm concerned, like everything is on the table. Like there's nothing that we can really rule out because with these silicone masks that are perfected and cloning technology is perfected. It's really hard to say. There's a
CGI.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Like, and combinations of all those together, it's like it's really difficult to say
it's the
what's
Mandela
real,
effect.
and that too. I think like, and we touched on this in the last video as well about time control technology and time wars playing an element in that as well. Um, I don't, after doing some research and I saw, some videos about David Lewis Anderson at the Anderson Institute where they experiment with time control technology. There's a great interview that Freeman Fly does with David Lewis Anderson from back in 2010. And I think I think in the video he says they were on their third or fourth generation device for time control. So they had, developed these devices for time control.
Hmm.
And in that video, he says that the nation of India is the leader in time control technologies. He says so advanced that they actually have like commercial applications that they could roll out, to the public, which is crazy. I mean, I think like I mean, it might make sense if you can grow.
What if being in control of time, you realize that it really has no value?
Well, that's one of the things he talks about is that like the people that work at the institute, they have to. I think it was once a month. He said that they have to talk about time or like a book or a movie or something that's related to time outside of their work day, right? And I think that's a problem. That's a significant problem. If and in some movies regarding time travel, that they like, especially it's they touch on that in Bill and Ted. It's like, well, dude, he's like, dude, we can just go back and we got all the time in the world right here. We can just go back and we just have to make sure when it's all over that we go back and actually do it. Do these things, right? So it's fascinating when I could see how like you could put off doing your dishes for a month, and then you know what I mean? Like it's like there's all kinds of, yeah, the value of time um what could decrease, but it could also increase the value of time, making see that uh
But what I'm saying is your existence is going to be a certain amount of time regardless. God decides of how many times your heart beats, regardless of how many times you port from timeline to timeline. You're going to only experience a certain amount of ticks, and that's it. Like, no, until you reincarnate. That's how I kind of see it. Now, if you can stop the aging process somehow, there's something to that. A lot of truthers have gotten into that subject of where we don't really we can live forever, but I don't know about that.
well, living forever, I mean, I think it that would devalue
Life.
life in
Hmm.
general, because with unlimited time, what do you do but get bored? I
Right.
mean, most people, like, again, when people have
I
time,
would say then life turns into a curse. It doesn't turn into a gift from God. It would turn into a curse.
absolutely.
And eternity.
And because, yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
because the shortened period of time that we have here, it is a gift, and we have to value it. That's what gives it value,
Mm-hmm.
is the fact that it's not a we have a specific amount of a short amount of time with which to do um, whatever it is that we need to do here. Um, so yeah, I find it interesting that that discussion about time, and I mean, it really does. I mean, in that interview, he says, some people, if you ask people like, uh, do they know what time it is? And they say yes. And it's like, okay, well, explain it to me. And they can't really. They're like, well, what is time? Well, I mean, it's a unit of measurement, or it's this and that, and they can't really describe what time is. Um, and again, I think
It's an
the
essence. And
yeah,
there's this random NPC in World of Warcraft that goes, "Time is of the essence." It's
right.
it's a stupid character, but that it's always stuck out in my head. I would remember that one little NPC.
Well, it really time is really relative because some people feel in a situation feel like time drags, and others feel like it's
It's
sped
your
up.
energy, though. It's your energy.
And our perception too, like how the events that take place in a day, like you can look at a day and say it dragged on, and other days you can say it's like, oh man, the time just flew by, and or a year went by and it just flew by, and other years just seem to drag on. Um,
How exciting
so
something is or not. If it's boring,
yeah,
it'll be really slow. If it's exciting, it'll be really fast. And the thing is, like, and now it can be, time can change depending on something I've noticed. Say, I know this is a terrible thing. I spent a couple months in jail, a couple different times, but being stuck inside of a jail, what time is weird. It's slow every day, but then when you look back at 2 3 weeks, it goes by kind of fast because you're in the same setting every day. Nothing has changed. It's repetitive. Your every memory is the same kind of memory. It's all been the same, so it's all been like pretty quickly. While each day is going by super slow. It's a long thought, drawn out day. You have to think about your life. But then when you think back about how long you've been in there, you're like, wow, it's been gone by kind of quick. So
right.
yeah, it's an interesting
Yeah,
perspective on
yeah.
environments
No,
too. Hmm.
because I think because there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing really. We don't have any. We don't have time. All we have is the moment that we're
Right.
in, right?
Hmm.
So that I mean, our perception of that accumulated over a length of the measurement of time. It's weird how we look back on things or forward to things instead of just focusing on the moment.
Mm.
And I think that's um like that phrase, like life is what happens while other people are making plans, right? And it's like, yeah, it's true. Like, like people, you can plan all you want, but all you really have is the moment.
Yeah,
uh
I was telling people about time. I tell people all the time that I've lived a really long life because I've moved around a lot. I've had a lot of different parents. I've been in love many different times. Um, and yeah, I've experienced life in a bunch of different cities, so it's like a different timeline. And I tell people if you've lived in the same house your whole life, that's one memory, and like you're you have a very short life has flown by, and you don't know why because you didn't do anything else. You stayed inside this box, and then you didn't have a ton of different life experiences, and I think that's the key to life is like changing it up as much as possible, hitting the reset button here and there, and finding new experiences and joys. And that increases your life in age. And that's kind of like time traveling for me. I feel like that's kept me young, and but helped me age, right, with some wisdom, I guess, from my young age. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's like it's weird because our growth and development and how we age is usually based on some unit of time measurement, right?
Hmm.
um when I was this age, I was immature or whatever. When I was these ages, I was more, mature than I was when I was younger. And and then I got older, and you look at time in that way. But
I've seen some really
many cultures,
mature, strong like mature kids. I've run into some super mature kids where I was like, at times in my life, it just depends on the mindset that you caught me in, how mature I'd be in, and passing, right? So I cut you
no,
off.
I
I'm
agree.
sorry.
No, I agree. I think that's part of it. Like we value how we value our lives is based on those timelines. And like the time I spent with my mom before she passed away. Like I look at that as like that year and a half is like a very special time in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there with her, it seemed to, be a very slow point in my life where each day was very long, and I enjoyed that. And I'm glad that it didn't just fly by. In hindsight, it seems like a long ways away, having been a year since she passed away now. But
Mm-hmm.
that when I think back on that time, that period, um, it really did seem like a slow point where I got to really enjoy her company and the time that we had together. So, um, even though I'm, removed from it, I still feel like, I still feel like, when I look back on that, we got a lot out of that year and a half, right, together. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, time is funny. That's why, the experiments that they do at these places, it's just like, it's kind of weird and bizarre, the whole idea.
Do you have any videos that you could link up in the chat for people to watch? Maybe
Yeah, let me just see if I can find this.
I blurred out my background. It doesn't look too bad. Boom. It's the first time using Zoom, really. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, give people some content to watch. I haven't really watched too much time travel content. I've just done a lot of thinking about it, as we all watch Back to the Future. One of the best conspiracy videos I ever watched was a Back to the Future 9/11 conspiracy video. You ever seen that one? It was super popular, like super popular. Yeah, I'll have to find it later and link it. I tried to look it up not too long ago. See if I can find it too. 9/11 Back to the Future conspiracy.
Yeah, let me just see if I can find this video here. Just give me a moment to try and.
Shot. Surprise terrorist attack.
Yeah, I found it. There we go. Hey, Princess.
Hi.
Say hey to Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Oh,
Good, thanks. How are you?
let's see.
How do
Oh, this has a cliff note at the bottom of this video. It says September 11 attacks, also called 9/11 attack series of airline hijackings. Why do they have a cliff note at the bottom of this? This video is called Back to the Future Predicts 9/11. You should watch that one. That one's awesome.
Well, that one, yeah. I mean, when he travels through time, the Twin Pines Mall,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's supposedly the Twin Pines Mall in the movie was where there were these two giant pine trees, and when he travels through the parking lot back in time, Marty McFly, he hits one of those trees, and then it just becomes the single or the Pine Mall or whatever when he travels back, right? So he altered the past because he altered the future by hitting that tree in the past.
Yep.
So it's no longer the Twin Pines Mall. So yeah, it's interesting. Uh, um, I mean, I personally believe that 9/11 was planned during the construction of the World Trade Center, right? Like back in the 60s. Like it was designed.
Like 50 years before or something.
Oh yeah, 100%. They had plans to. I mean, that's part of their, you know, sort of Bilderberg. They like to build something so they can destroy it and start over again, right? So they build something up, and in order to start over, you have to destroy what already exists, right? So, um, so that's part of.
Got any favorite time travel movies other than Back to the Future? I saw Time Cop back in the day, and there was a movie with these kids who found a time machine in like their neighbor's basement or something. I saw it once. I can't remember what the name of it was though. It was pretty interesting. And then there was Looper. Any movies?
Looper's a good one. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because I mean, a lot of films are bringing time travel into the narrative. So if you look at the last of Avengers Endgame, they used a time. Sorry, spoilers. They use a time control, a time travel element.
Well, anybody watching my channel is watching movies for conspiracies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not the primary focus of the movie, but it is a plot driver.
I do, yeah. There's one Infinity Stone, right? That has the
Time Stone. Yes.
Time Stone, right?
And they have to, in order to fix the past, they have to travel back in time, and so they have to develop time travel, and in order to do it, so it drives the plot. It's a major plot driver throughout the whole story, and that movie specifically, and a lot of other films again.
Butterfly Effect was a good one.
Butterfly Effect is one. You know, even Event Horizon, you know, is.
Oh, yeah, with the machine, with the ship was traveling through portals and time traveling and gaining intelligence through each time it would travel, right?
You know, I think, you know, even the Time Machine.
Now, do you think beyond just conspiracies, like let's draw back to a concrete reality. Let's get to like a metaphoric parable to our life in time traveling. Like, what are some realistic, like lower level time traveling realities that we experience on each day? I think about memories are one of them, I guess, and then like looking at pictures. I often feel like we time travel when we look at pictures and things like that. Read stories.
That sparks a memory, and we're reliving through our memories. Also, dreams, I think, can be time traveling, space and time traveling.
What about deja vu? What do you think that is?
Well, I had a weird experience when I was younger, where I had a dream and I remembered the dream, and then about 2 weeks later, I was at a coffee shop, and that exact moment happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I suddenly realized that I was like, oh my God, our dreams, like, you know, like people talk about dreaming about something that's to come. And I was like, you know, because it was such a mundane, completely ridiculous thing. I was just getting up from a coffee table with friends, but everything was exactly the way it was. Everything that was said was exactly, you know, it was. I saw that exact moment for about 10 seconds in my dream.
See, back to that thought. So, like, the deja vu, I've heard this theory. It's based off, like, time travel. So, as I was saying, like, if you lived in one room with 4 white walls, and you never painted that room, and you lived there for 50 years, say, like, you had deja vu, and it was a collection of all your memories that you ever had, and it was just in that one moment, and then you thought it was deja vu because it was a collection of every memory you ever had in that one moment. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So
it was just everything that you were familiar with, that you've always been familiar with, just synced up in that moment for you, as like familiarity.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, no, I spent a lot of time in that coffee shop, so it's weird, but it was, you know, the way someone pushed their chair in, and how we all got up and moved in that same direction.
Like in the Matrix, you've been down that road before. You've seen it happen.
Yeah, it was very Matrix-like.
So back to the deja vu thing. I had deja vu like 2.5 years ago with my wife. We were fighting, and I was like, oh my God, I've been in this seat before fighting with her. And then when the movie The Matrix popped into my head, they were like, oh, this is a download. And then my mind went, I downloaded a new file. Like, what's going on here? And I addressed it, and I was like, there's a fight going on here. There's a learning lesson. I'm supposed to learn a lesson. There's something going on here. And then me and my wife really haven't fought since then. We've had like one or two little things, and it goes away real quick. We kind of just, but since that day, we've been really cool with each other. And I just snapped out of it. And then one day I had an Uber passenger in my car, and I just started having deja vu again. And I was like, I'm having deja vu. You've been in my car before. And he's like, I've never met you before. And I was like, no, I'm having deja vu. And the guy was like, oh, really? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I honestly believe that you're in my car for a reason. How do I know you? How do you, like, where you're from? What's your backstory, life? What do you believe? I started asking him all these questions, like, why are you in my car? Kind of like, there's a reason that you're in my car, possibly. I wanted to know why he was in my car. Maybe there was a reason that I was having deja vu at that moment. So.
Yeah, I think, like, that's why I never really put any real stock into that moment, because it just seemed like such a weird, like...
But it's a moment in time that could have been, as I'm saying, so we're discussing time, right? It could have been a downloaded file. You ever think about something like that? Like, literally outside of the Matrix, inside of the Matrix. Have you ever seen the Benjamin Libet test, where they took people on electrodes and they hooked up their brain to a time board, and they would ask the person what time they were going to choose. The machine would show it before their brain would physically respond. So it was like it knew before he actually knew what answer he was going to choose. So that means to me that the answer was coming from outside of himself, as if it was remote control.
Well, that's the big question about our existence, right? Do we have free will, or are we part of just some...
A third-party device. Yeah. Are we prisoners here of our own device?
Yeah. It's definitely...
Jumanji.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird because you...
Oh, you froze on me? Oh, there you go.
You know, we don't really know the answer to that. You know, we don't really know. You know, I mean, there might be someone who knows the answer to that, but
Right.
I still think, you know, like, because again, like I was talking about this with a friend recently, that like nobody can die or kill themselves without being activated by
God.
You know, to do so by a higher source. Which again...
That's like Demolition Man. If you seem like they couldn't kill Cocteau unless he was allowed to, and he's like, I can't kill you, and he's like, because I didn't allow you to, and then he's like, here, kill this motherfucker, and he hands the gun to the other guy, and he's like, I can kill you though.
Yeah, exactly. No,
Yeah.
That's perfect. That's a perfect example. Yeah, it's like there's part of a programming and a code, and it's like you're only activated to do that, right? Because most people, I think...
Do you think some people are like walking around freely, and then some people are unlocked NPCs, and some people are completely just locked in NPCs?
I think some people are locked in NPCs, but I also think that... I still think we have, most of us that have a soul have free will, but what that free will really entail, I think there's conditions to that, right? Like, there's limitations based on God's laws. So I think we sort of talked a bit about this before, that we can do things, but it has to be within God's parameters, you know?
Yeah.
To do them.
The laws of causation.
Yeah, because we can't kill ourselves or kill someone else without being activated to do so. And what are the reasons for it? Like, we think, you know, these random killers, you know, out there, they're just psychos and something wrong with them, there's a screw loose. But, you know, I often wonder...
I often had this thought on this subject, so like activated to do so, and you kind of like hinted at both parties. Do you think that like somebody couldn't die unless they had a part of him in them that had accepted death?
I don't know, because I know some
They had
people
to
die.
activate it. Well, some people choose not to or want to in that moment, but something in
Well,
the past had activated it.
well, I still think there's some people who die from, diseases or whatever. They're just like, this is not my time. They don't believe it, and right up until their death, they're just like, I've been hornswoggled. I've been, I've been like, I've been had. I deserve more of a life,
Hmm.
and they didn't get it. So I don't know if that's necessarily true. If they really have accepted it and come to terms with it.
See, I
Again,
have
I think that.
a thing about this though. Like I've seen people control survive off placebo. My dad got cancer and refused to believe it. He stopped taking his chemo, left, and then got cancer again 30 years later, died of cirrhosis, and a big story. He pretty much just like didn't believe it. Now, I've heard the story thousands of times of people living their life, they find out they have cancer, and then they shortly die after. What if you just didn't go find out that you had cancer?
Yeah, I think that knowing is part of it.
The
Like,
battle. Knowing is half the battle. Like,
well, I think many people
G.I.
have.
Joe.
Yeah, many people. Yeah, no, many
Yeah.
people get cancer and don't even know it and are healed from it because your body
It's healing
detoxes.
itself. That's what it's doing, right? Yeah.
It's only when you're diagnosed with it that your mind is programmed. Then, like, oh, I have cancer now. I'm going to die from
It's
this.
a death disease. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
it's
think
designed to
that.
kill me, not help me. That's what they're thinking. They're yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're just thinking it's a death sentence,
Instead of
and I
life
think
sentence.
yeah,
Yeah, that
and
crazy.
nobody, and I think that people don't.
We're not doctors,
Yeah,
by the way. I'm not a doctor. He's not a doctor,
yeah,
and this is just our personal opinions.
exactly.
Not that
And
we
I
need
still
to say
think
that, but yeah.
it's good to point that out. Um, uh, I always tell people when I'm giving financial advice, I'm like, I'm not a financial planner, so take it with a grain of salt. Don't take my advice and then bank on it. But
I don't want anybody to take my word as authority. I want them to have their own mind as their own authority. So
well, I mean that's again like some people get diseases and they come out on like better than they did before because of the mindset that they put themselves in and allow themselves to heal and get through it, right? Like I think it's all about the mind, the power of the mind. Some people just think, oh, this is it. I got cancer. My number's up, and they allow that to determine their future, the way they think. And other people who, you know, get those diseases and think, there's no way. There's just no way I'm gonna beat this. I am going to beat this no matter what, and they do, and they move forward. And again, I think the only way you couldn't beat that is if again you were activated, right? Like you're uh,
God turned you
forced.
off.
Yeah, God says
Have
no.
you seen the you watch Alice in Wonderland movies where they have the timekeeper?
Yeah,
Yeah, and then the timekeeper like decides when they take people's little ornament off the tree, and boom, their electric box shuts
exactly,
off. Yeah.
exactly like that. Yeah, and I think that that's very similar to that. And
Yeah, a lot of see. I think me and you both, Mark, are into like the huge fantasy movies that metaphorically show parables into our life and realms, and I think the fantasy movies just like that and like Never-Ending Story, they have a huge like uh, basis of reality and scientifically, in my opinion, and like they're very based. A lot of the fantasy movies and science, I think.
yeah, you know, I find all of that really interesting, and I like to watch movies and pick those things apart from it.
Because ideas are responsible for, and like even Einstein, even though, have you ever watched, there's a documentary called Einstein's Idiots, but like wonder, like Odin was a wanderer, and Einstein also said like imagination you have to have an imagination to like be able to think of something. Like movies have thought of inventions, and then somebody saw it in a movie, and then they decided to make that technology. It was it was created through an imagination, and then made into a movie, and then made into an actual thing. So
Yeah, and you're right. And you're right. It does come from somewhere. And that, like, like your imagination, your thoughts. You know, when someone has an epiphany or an idea, right? It's like, well, where's the correlation? Like, what is the sequence of events that link together for that to come into your head? Like, how does that all work? Because that's incredible. Like, to me, that's, those thought processes and patterns, those synapses that fire in a specific pattern to give you those thoughts or ideas, right? Like, where does it come from? I think it has a lot to do with practice. Like, I think if you're in that, that mindset, you're constantly, exercising your mind like it's a muscle. It's easier to do that. Like people who meditate frequently tend to have a better handle on that how their life is, and the things that happen or don't happen to them. So if you don't practice those things, again, like I'm a guitar player, right? So like if I don't practice, I lose my calluses and dexterity, and it's like riding a bike, but again, it's you're rusty when you come back to it, if you haven't, even for just a few days or a week, right? So you have to keep that up. You have to keep it up and fresh in your mind, and and I think that there's a lot in life that's like that, where if you're not practicing positive thinking, like some people think positive thinking is a detriment, right? Like you shouldn't always be thinking positive, but I'm sort of on the fence with that. Like I don't really think that. I think people who constantly think negative things experience that regularly in their lives. They're constantly in a negative environment because that's how they think. That's their mindset.
There's an example of this that I bet before you, the positive and negative thing. So when I first woke up in the movement, there's a lot of things that the movement you wake up to when you first wake up that are put before you to make you a very toxic human being. One of them is fighting with the police. Don't fight with the police. Turn your lights on. Put your hands on the steering wheel. Turn your hands down. Unless you know the black law book front and back and you're like the most Jedi dude ever, don't pull the crap that they're showing you in these videos unless you want to spend time in jail.
Yeah, I agree. I think that
yeah, but there's a lot of combative nature. I think the world will be as cohesive as you make it. If you come at them with a complete compliance Jedi-like mindset, you're going to be about your way. I know the government tells you this and says this to you, but it really is the truth. Like, if what's your point of struggling with them? Like, yeah.
And what you put out there comes back to you. I mean, I've had to deal with police in many sticky situations and managed to de-escalate and diffuse the situation just from the tone of my voice.
Yeah.
Like, people get defensive immediately, like, well, why did you pull me over? No, tell me why you pulled me over. I'm not going to give you my ID until you tell me why. It's like, okay, I get that maybe they might be infringing on your rights or whatever, and you're a constitutionalist and you believe in your rights and freedoms, but at the same time, it's not always police that escalate the situation.
I was watching this black guy. Yeah, they escalate the situation. But I was watching this black guy, Charleston. He's a famous black guy in the black community. and he was saying that he just kind of put it in a slightly different perspective, said it very simply, like, turn your car lights on, roll your windows all the way down, front and back, put your hands on the steering wheel, and just say, yes, officer, no, officer. You're letting the officer know that you care about his safety too. And that, that you're and him are on the same team, and you're both human beings. There's a human being there. And I think even in the truth movement, we can't get caught up in treating people like they're not human beings. So that's the biggest thing. They want to make the conspiracy and truthers sound absolutely obnoxiously crazy and combative. And so,
I know that there's a lot of people out there who most people want to be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
They want to, they want to work their job. They want to raise their families. They want to drink beer on the weekends and have a barbecue. They want to be left alone.
Well, there's two different kinds of truthers. There's the kinds that live in Portland and Seattle, and then there's people that do our stuff. There's woke and there's fake woke. There's people that talk about what the government's doing, and then there's people that are, fake woke.
Well, yeah, and I think that there's a lot of, again, there's people who act to, like the instigators or the provocateurs that try to provoke.
But I think some people are brainwashed into all the division, though. I don't think a lot of it's paid provocateurs. I only think it takes a couple idiots to really get a mob of idiots together. Like we were talking about last time, a person is smart, people are dumb.
Yeah, and I've seen some videos recently of people that are going to Queen's Park in Toronto, that's where the provincial government runs out of, and they're with megaphones, and they're shouting like, "We don't want to eat the bugs," and blah blah blah. And it's like, look, first of all, you're not changing anyone's mind. Second of all, all you're doing is making people look crazy. And lastly, you're still in the anger stage of the awakening process. You need to move past that. Find practical solutions and accept the fact that, yes, there is a small group of people on this planet that want a lot of us dead, and that's just the way it is. You can't, getting angry about it doesn't, in most situations, getting angry really doesn't change anything. I think anger can be a motivating factor and can be a great motivator, but when you're only acting on anger, you're not really accomplishing anything unless you take something from it and become motivated and driven to do something about that anger or what angers you. And the awakening process is a very traumatic process. I'm not denying that at all. I think it's traumatic on so many different levels, and when you finally, it can be very traumatic and depressing. And I think people need to find ways to work through that rather than just shouting at the top of their lungs. Yes, there might be a phase or a stage that you need to go through in order to get that anger out and move past that stage. I don't suggest you bottle it up. I get it out.
Yeah, there's a lot of trauma we all woke up to. Being lied to is very traumatic.
And I tell people, you need to go have that stage, but you cannot dwell on that stage and stay in it. You need to move past it.
It's got to be like stages of grief.
Exactly like stages of grief. There's an anger stage, yes, but you cannot stay there because it's unhealthy and it doesn't really accomplish anything. And that's what I tell people now. If all you're doing is shouting slogans and marching in the streets, you're not really, the government doesn't care about that. They really don't. And
we've got to change the culture. That's what you have to do. We have to change knowledge as a culture. Yeah.
Well, I tell people finding practical solutions is the answer. Once you find practical solutions outside of their system, fighting the system's designed, it's like a mouse fighting a gorilla. You're not going to win. Even 1,000 mice, what a bunch of us, even 1,000 mice fighting a gorilla. It's a losing battle. You're not designed to win, but you need to, what the mice should do is find the food supply of the gorilla and eat the food supply and consume that, and then starve the gorilla to death So work outside of the system to find ways to starve the system to death without becoming a victim of it, because they want you to fight the system. They want you because they know that it's stacked in their favor. Um, that by fighting the system, more often than not, you're gonna lose. Uh, it's designed that way. It just is.
Yeah,
Um,
and
and when you,
we're saying a lot of similar things. Is the Bible? There's some Bible verses that people get really truthers get upset about the Bible saying pretty much accept slavery. They're saying you can not like the world that's been born around you, but you have to accept the reality of the situation that you're born into. You just can't be delusional about it. And you have to go along and get along cohesively to make the world work for you. Now, just fighting it is not gonna cause any good in your life. It's just gonna cause more problems. Especially if like you have all these delusional solutions to the problems that you're running into in reality. Like, yeah, there's a new world order, right? But like, what are you gonna do about that? Like,
exactly.
yeah,
Because I see a lot of people like they're like, oh, I'm awake to what's going on. It's like, well, you may be aware of what's going on, but you're really not doing anything about it. You're just complaining on Facebook to everyone else, and you're not really trying to find a way to beat the system, or a way to work outside of that. Like there's so
I realized that the friend bomb movement, while it was amazing and I love it and it changed my life, that I think it was done almost on purpose to get us in these echo chambers and just talking amongst each other, and not out in the streets, not creating groups and change groups and like awareness groups and websites and our own stuff, doing our own thing, our own businesses on activism and groups. We have a powwow on every social media site that we're all locked in on, and yeah, that's why I essentially started doing my ride shares. That I was eventually going to start doing street work. Those are my favorite like flat Earth channels that I like to follow, and I only really follow one or two now, and that's because they still do street work. But and because of the damn AE map, if you have that on there at all, I'm gone. It's like, but
right.
yeah, so
Well, and I think that there's a lot of folks that want, especially with social media. I find like every other day someone's invited me to a new freedom group or this and that. It's like I'm all grouped out, guys. Like we need to consolidate, and like someone just wants to be. They got into an argument with someone else on another page. No, I'm gonna start my own group. Okay, start your own group. Like it, and it's just like,
admins of these groups are Nazis, like straight up Nazis. I've never seen anything like it.
yeah, there's a lot of folks that either, like, typically, not always, but typically when I see something a friend has posted that I don't agree with, I just don't comment on it. I just
Yeah,
don't bother. Like I don't bother to go like, oh, by the way, I think you're wrong because of these reasons. Like I'm not a 12-year-old kid on a playground,
I used
trying
to.
to.
Like, I used to respond to
I
all
did
kinds of
too.
stuff.
I used to too, and I found on social media that like it's just a waste of
You don't have
energy.
to. You don't have to.
You do not have
If
to.
if I do, it's generally because I'm trolling. Like, I'm like, fuck it, let's respond.
If I, it's usually either I'm trolling or I really feel it's important to say something about it.
Hmm.
But I mean, 9 times out of 10, I just don't even bother anymore. I just don't even bother. I allow someone else to figure it out on their
Now, do
own,
you think
or
that's a bad thing? Do you think the world has weighed its woes on you to where you don't care anymore, and that the change in you has been whittled away? Like, you're
I
believing,
don't think so. I
no?
think I think spiritually, I'm just picking and choosing my battles.
Right.
And I think a lot of people get invested so much in those arguments when at the end of the day, it really doesn't go anywhere and you don't change anyone's mind. You're really just wasting your time.
There are a lot of
know.
agents and provocateurs on these social media websites and bots and fake accounts that aren't even real. And I get to the point to where like any negativity or personal attacks on any ideas or blanket statements I laid, I just decided to start unfriending these people and stop talking to them. Like let's talk about the topic I'm talking about, and don't target me. I'm not targeting you. Stay on topic. And if those people can't do that, then I'm just gonna immediately remove you. And then almost every time I've unfriended somebody, they message me with some asshole message afterwards. I'm like, thank you, I appreciate it. Like, I made the right decision. Like,
Well, you're either arguing with someone whose mind isn't going to be changed, or it's an algorithm. Like, it's not even a real person. And so, it's just like, well, I mean, am I wasting my time here? Like sometimes those threads can go on
forever,
for days, and
they never shut up. They're doing that's the last word. It's literally they just want the last word over and over again.
Like I try to reach out recently to people and say to them like, hey, if you want to talk about this, give me a call, give me a call. Let's not just text back and forth or message back and forth. Actually, let's talk on the phone. And some people are like terrified of phone calls. Like I made a post recently on Facebook that said, why are people afraid of a phone call? I'm sick of spending an hour texting back and forth what should be a 5-minute conversation or 10-minute conversation.
Yeah, it can be done really quick. And you get people's vibe and energy with their sound of their voice a lot.
Exactly. And I think like anyone suspicious that friends me on Facebook and sends me a message that says like, we have to FaceTime. I FaceTime with all people that I don't know, and then usually if they're bullshit or they're fake or whatever, they back away. They're like, and then so I immediately call them, and then they hang up, and it's like, okay, well if you're not gonna FaceTime me, then that's an indication that you're either not real or you don't care enough to So it's like that's the that's usually the marker for me. It's like, okay, well if you're not gonna FaceTime me or you're gonna decline to FaceTime or talk on the phone, like people want information from me. I'm like, look, you just call me and I'll give you the information in 5 or 10 minutes rather than spending an hour with my thumbs back and forth. It's like I just find that annoying and very, very like
it's new age.
Very it's just like, okay, and some people are just have this anxiety now because they know they can text or message people.
They don't have real conversations. Yeah,
they're afraid to have a real conversation with people, and it's like, and some of them say,
they get scared somebody's calling them. Oh, what do I do? What does he want? What could they possibly say or think right now?
Well, what's interesting is that before, unless you had call display, when your phone rang, you just picked it up, and whoever was on the other line was whoever was on the other line. And now people are so guarded. It's like, okay, I know exactly who's trying to get a hold of me. I know exactly when and all this stuff. It's like, just answer the fucking phone and like just reach out and touch someone, man. Like
reach out and touch faith.
Yeah, it's like, like don't be afraid to talk to someone. Like, and I know again a lot of people use the I have social anxiety reason or excuse or whatever, and it's like, okay, that's cool, but a great way to work on that is to pick up the phone every once in a while and just take a phone call, say, hey, what's going on? I love it when people like randomly like call me or stop by my house or whatever. I used to love random and like drop-ins and phone calls. Like
there's a funny comedian, Sebastian Maniscalco. He does a segment about like back in the day when people used to come over, you'd be like, somebody's here, welcome, and now it's like, don't move, look out the door, see who it is, turn TV off, turn it off, see who it is, act like we're not here. Like times have changed. People have become so like anti each other,
which I think again is the
social media. Yeah,
technology has led them to this where they've isolated themselves from humanity and it makes it easier to implement whatever agenda because you're not actually engaging with your fellow man the way we used to even 25 years ago, which really isn't very long ago.
No,
Like
it's not.
even 20 years ago, most people didn't have a call display feature. Like some of you know, you obviously have a cell phone or whatever you did, but even cell phones weren't that common back in say like 1998, or like 20 some years ago. Um, so to me, it's like the phone rings. It's like, oh, someone wants to talk to me. Cool. Pick up the phone and the only time I really got upset is if it was like a telemarketer or something. But most of the time, it's like, yo, someone wants to chat, and that's awesome. And now, people post memes all the time about like freaking out that someone's calling them. It's like,
I
really?
understand if it's an attractive female. Those are the few cases that I understand. Like if they're a Facebook truther and they have 4,000 people and they're an attractive female that gets hundreds of likes every day, I I get it. I get why they're doing it.
I think
But
that's also,
yeah.
I agree, and I think that's also an extension of the technology. Like
Hmm.
that wouldn't like if their number was just a listed number, only someone looking for that person
But you can call like
would
you can do it the Facebook call. I think that's what they're generally doing. You can.
exactly, and that's cool. But I mean, I'm really talking about people like that are friends, like someone that I know
Oh, I
and
thought you meant
spend time with.
like people we didn't know.
Well,
Um,
only if they message me first.
yeah.
If they message me and they're suspicious, like I'm suspicious that they're, trying to solicit or something like that, or they're a scammer, that's when I pull out oh, well, we have to FaceTime so that I can verify who you are. And they
Yeah.
usually fuck off after that. But it's like friends and people I've hung out with like many times that are like afraid to take, like I try to call them and they're just like, "Ugh," and they freak out. It's like, come on, like we used to hang out and work together or whatever. It's like I don't care what you're unless you're literally wiping your ass on the toilet, like you're literally busy, like in the bathroom, and like just answer the call or
Yeah.
having sex or
I
something
used
that
to be
would
a little nervous about answering like random Facebook friend phone calls, but now I don't. And one of the last ones I did, I was really happy that I did. There was this guy that was like having like a bad suicidal drunken episode, got laid off at work, and yeah, I was just able to talk to him. I felt really good just about answering it and just talking to him and walking him through his problems. It was kind of like I was like, you know what? And it was funny. It was like I normally don't answer these. My wife was in the car, but I was like, for some reason, I feel like I should answer this, and I answered it. And I just sat there and talked to him about his problems. My wife's sitting there looking at me like, we're just sitting here talking to some random stranger in the car, bawling, crying, drunk at 7 in the morning. And I was like,
yeah.
it's what we've got involved in. So
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, again, like I mean, I don't just, I don't make all kinds of phone calls randomly to a bunch of people. But the other day, a former roommate and a good friend of mine, we talked for 3 hours on the phone.
mhm.
Like that seemed like nothing. Like, like she's one of the like a really good friend of mine, and talking for 3 hours just flew by. It didn't seem like anything. And I have conversations like that a lot with people now, like where it's just like a long, you know,
Connection.
catching up 3 hour conversation on the phone. And some people don't even want that. It's like they'd rather try and text you, or it's like I can't do that. Texting or messaging is fine if you're trying to, um, just get directions or it's a short interaction or whatever. But if you really want to talk to someone, just fucking call them. Just call them and talk to them. Like, like people, like I posted some stuff on Facebook. People were like, "Oh, I want more information on that," and I tested the waters a bit. And so I said, "Oh, just send me a message and we'll talk, and we'll call. I'll give you a call." And very few people took the call. They're like, I'm busy." And it's
Like,
like,
how
okay.
much do you care about the truth if you're not willing to have a conversation?
And they're like, well, just
You
text
know?
it to me.
Like,
I'm like,
honestly. Like, how
well, they're
much
like,
do you
just text
really
it to me. I'm like,
care
no, no, no,
if
no.
you're not
Because
willing to talk?
I'm gonna say something, and then you're gonna have questions, and it's easier for me to answer those questions by talking to you. And hardly any, and some of them said, oh, I have time at this later in the week or whatever, and they never followed up with me. They were never, because like I'm the kind of guy who'd be like, Thursday, okay, what time should I call you? And then Thursday at that time, I'm gonna call you back and get that information. But that's just how I grew up and how I, used to interact with people. So to me, it is very much, uh, it's much more um, advantageous to call the person than it is to try and text it out now. Like I hate that so much. Like, just call me and catch up. Like there's so much more we can say in 5 minutes than I can ever text. And I don't even like. Again, like I said, I would rather talk to someone than try and message them all this information. Like it's tedious, and I'm not
So,
very fast at typing. So
so something just happened like an hour ago that Facebook removed everybody's followers. Like thousands of activists have lost all their followers.
really,
I had 1,000 followers. There's some people that had 8,000 followers, 10,000 followers, and they're all gone. Facebook removed everybody's followers.
really,
Yeah. So, yeah, there was one feature that kept you really connected with strangers. Like, like, yeah, it's kind of interesting they made that move,
that's interesting.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I think.
Because all the other platforms
Um,
have followers. Like, literally.
Yeah, that's a weird one. I mean, I don't know understand why. Yeah. I mean, um that's gonna end up being a weird scenario where um uh yeah, I think I mean, that's just more censorship, and I mean, it's not exactly censorship, but you're not, you know what I mean? Like you're not really allowing.
And you didn't. I don't
the-
think anybody knew that this was going to happen. The people that follow these people, they should be given an opportunity to be like, hey, we're going to remove this feature, and if maybe you can get a chance to friend them before we remove you from their following, and like, so I don't know. It just seems just to delete it seems very Nazi-ish. Like,
Well, that's what's weird about social media is that like it is very much like that to me. Like there's a level of, I mean, and a lot of people are aware of this, but like, I
you're
mean,
using their platform.
yeah, and um, I'm permanently banned from Twitter.
Oh yeah.
Like my account is permanently like suspended, and not just temporarily, but they like I've tried to appeal like a dozen times, and every time it's just like, no, you're too dangerous. And and of course I was in the great Twitter purge of January 7th of 2021, after the January 6th stuff. I was one of the people, along with Trump, that got kicked off.
The
Like 1.5 million people or whatever in one day got kicked off Twitter,
crazy.
and that I was, yeah, I got banned. And
That's why
so
I stopped. Like, I got away from like the whole sensational of like the what was like popularity trending, because I felt like that's what they were pulling at my dopamine the most, and they were able to control those people in those conversations in fields and realms of fields easier because of the trends of conversations and algorithms of words, and the people talking about certain things were able to find because of bots they were using to ban people like us. So like I got to the point where I just didn't even want to be around whatever was trending at the time. And then the whole election thing just got really repetitive over and over again. And like with the hopium, and everything, and it just seemed like with every date there was no hope to be found. So I don't know, but always weird things happening, but nothing happening. It was just like I don't know. It's just I'm so sick of politics. It's like something that I think I'll always be sick of, possibly.
Well, I think politics are in many ways designed to turn people off, so that they do the bare minimum, which is voting. They don't get involved. They don't take any. They don't ever run for office. They just want to trust. I think it's very very calculated, very well designed system to keep people like you and I from ever being able to govern ourselves. Um, and I believe we do need some leadership. But I don't think it needs to. We need much smaller governments, and like a lot of these bottom feeders are just, they're in it for a pension. They're just sort of, I don't know. They're parasites. That's what they're doing. They're parasites that are just feeding off of our tax money and our goodwill and all that stuff, right? So they're not really doing anything really. They're like, there's just the idea that they do something, right?
Yeah.
They don't actually achieve anything or accomplish anything. There's just like the notion that, well, like the system, like, for example, like we have to have politicians. We have to have an antiquated, well, up here in Canada, the parliamentary system, right? When we could become a constitutional republic and get away with, or make rules that say, because I think a lot of the problem is the party politics, right? It's not the individual, it's the party that's pushing the agenda, and so
The paradigm.
yeah, like for example, it's like, um,
I think people need to stop caring about like their team rights versus their individual rights. Like
exactly.
yeah, and they lose
Well,
sight
I
of the
think,
bigger picture.
well, that's why I like municipal politics, because there aren't any parties. It's just the individual. It's the guy that's running. Do they still try and stack the deck? Of course they do. But when it comes to municipal politics, it's just the individual that's running. They're not a part of a party or a system like that.
Hmm.
Um, so control. It's just that guy running for office, which I think is where we need to get back to. I think, people all the time say, when I call it the party system, the two-party system, they say, well, okay, genius, then who are we supposed to vote for? I'm like, well, what if we vote for each other? What if we find candidates that are, uh, you know, reliable, trustworthy people and
Now,
want to run for office?
now there is the that video I told you about. I saw the old guy in the courtroom yelling at the judge, where he was saying, "I'm not a registered voter, so you can't find a jury of my peers. Therefore, you have to let me go." Um.
Right.
So, yeah. What? There's that thought process too. Like, if I don't register to vote, then I'm a free American anyway. Registering to vote is like you being a part of the U.S. citizenship pool and their laws.
Right.
If you're just an American, then you're just the living breath and land and air of God, essentially, and you're free to live in peace long as you're not doing another harm.
Well, I agree. I think that's the problem. Like you said, people care more about the collective than they do about their individual rights.
Yeah.
And we've been conditioned and sort of funneled into the system where that's all people really talk about or care about. And I think it's never been more obvious than with the restrictions, the COVID restrictions, where people are sort of fighting as a collective unit against the system and these things without taking into account that all of it comes down, like again, like I stopped getting back in, I guess it was like around October maybe of 2020, where I stopped getting upset about other people wearing masks, right? Like I still think they look stupid or whatever, or, but I don't get upset and try and say, "Hey man, what are you wearing a mask for?" Because that's what freedom is. It's choice. And if you want to walk around and you want to wear a mask because you think it's protecting you, that's okay. You're welcome to do that. Just as long as you don't tell me I have to wear a mask,
Right.
right? If that's what that, and I started thinking about like, well, that's what freedom is. It's choice. And if I try and tell them that they shouldn't wear a mask, I'm taking that choice away from them. And
Well,
frankly, I
you're
don't.
telling them they shouldn't. It's their choice that
I,
they shouldn't, though.
yeah, and I'm then forcing my will upon them, which I don't believe is right either. It's like if you want to wear a mask, go right ahead, but don't tell me I've got to wear a mask. Because it's my freedom to choose what I want from my body. I don't want to breathe in blue plastic particles. I don't want to, inhibit my ability to breathe oxygen.
Lead by
Um,
example.
so yeah, and if I don't wear one and other people see that and say, hey, I don't want that either. I don't want to. I want to. I want that one for myself. I don't want to have to wear a mask. Go for it.
Yeah, the
But
fear um, is what that bothers me, though. I just hate seeing people in that mindset. It just, I, I'm not like. I think there's a huge division that I never get into of like us versus them. Mine is more of I feel sorry for them. I know that sounds bad. You're like I don't want your pity, but honestly, it's sick. It's sick to me. There's
well,
what the government has done is absolutely disgusting, and I find the mind control that these people are under is absolutely sickening, and it bothers me to my heart. And I care about them, and so, but it just bothers me, and I just let it go because I don't want to deal with them, and because they've heard every argument that I have to say. So for me to get there and just jump into a fight that I know that I'm going to get into, and that road that I've been down before, like the Matrix road, there's no point in me jumping down that road. Like, and we've had that conversation before. So
yeah, I think that again, like a lot, and it's a very tricky scenario, especially with the vaccines, right? Like a lot of people are very like, oh, we need to help these people who are vaccinated. I'm like, well, I get, it is unfortunate, and I do acknowledge that it's unfortunate what's happened to these people, but I don't necessarily have sympathy for them
mhm.
because they've done it to themselves.
Right.
And I don't.
But I was also ignorant at one point in time, and I got my son vaccinated, and he has vaccine damage. None of us are
Right.
all know better, so we all wake up to knowledge at different times. The pandemic was a big silver lining for a lot of people, and that was a big silver lining for a lot of truthers. We
Yeah.
all ran into a huge another wave of following, like, and a huge new bunch of friends that are like, I don't know how many times in the past couple of years I said, "Oh, I just woke up to this," and I just literally found the movement, and I've seen hundreds of these people. Like,
Yeah, I can honestly say that by back in 2008, when I really, when I had my sort of like full on like, like I knew the agenda and I knew it was coming, you know, um, I was terrified for a long time because I didn't see anybody talking about any of this stuff. Like nobody. I mean, I had two friends, my friend Evan and my friend Stuart, and I could talk to those guys about this stuff endlessly. But anybody else is just like, "Oh, that's crazy. You guys are
I
nuts."
try to bring like the Illuminati up to my stepdad when I was probably like 20 years old, 19, and then I was looking at this stuff about, and it was way before the whole transgender argument. It was like at the beginning, and I was like, what do you think about celebrities all being trans? It was like way before the movement on Facebook. It was like MySpace days, and I was like, I
Mm.
heard that this person was Lady Gaga. I was like, Lady Gaga's a man. Everybody knows this. It was like the beginning of her career, and I was like, it's a man. And I was trying to tell my little cousins, who are now into conspiracies too, that's a man. They were singing her song. I was like, that's a man. They were little kids at the time. I shouldn't have been doing that. That's when you got to know your place in time. I shouldn't have been telling little boys that that's a woman or a man dressed up as a woman. It's just not the right place and time. Like, yeah, there's a lot of appropriate truth or information for everybody, and a lot of learning lessons.
And again, I think I mentioned this maybe before we were talking about it, but like I don't like now. I typically don't do. I don't send a lot of links to people, and I might give them point them in the right direction. But if they want to find the truth, they have to find it because that's when it has a truly profound impact. Is when you go looking for something and you find it, like truly go looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
If I just give you a bunch of links to information and you read, I mean,
It's
nine
not the
times out of
same.
10, I get people just like, that's not true. That's not a reliable source, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, look, if you go digging for the truth and you really want to find it, you will find it. I believe that, that the spirits in life that are guiding me in the right direction. And, sometimes it might be a dead end or false information, but you still have to keep digging, and I think there's too many people who are just they're just fucking know-it-alls now. It's just like, especially in the conspiracy or the truth community, they're just like, well, no, 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 it's different. I mean, like we talked about, like we've already spent time researching stuff, and I use kid gloves with people. Like I typically don't go after them the way I used to. I'd still like, okay, well that's interesting. Well, you may want to look at this as well.
Well,
And if
there's
they
that
aren't
old
willing to,
saying about like the world or America's raising arrogant and stupid people. Well, they're waking up from that arrogance and stupidity, like
yes,
yeah.
and they need to find it on their own.
And
I
then
can't.
the stages of grief, and then the anger, and yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell people what the truth is. They have to go and find the truth on their own. And I'm not going to try and explain. Again, I typically use the Socratic method by asking them questions so that they can go and find the answers. It's like like I'm not going to spoon feed it to anyone. If you want to find it, go out and look for it. Like that's what I spent 30 years doing. So if you have to Google search a few things, like consider yourself lucky, because back in the day, I had to sift through books and read for hours and days and weeks to find information and then
Do you
try
know,
and track down
you know how
another
many
book
truthers
or
have ever
author.
been in a library?
I know it's crazy. And,
Yeah.
and some people just watch a video and they're like, oh, I understand this concept now. It's like, okay, you understand that person's.
Sometimes videos are really well done, and they have a
Yep.
collection of everything you've ever experienced, and they link a lot of dots together for you. So
And I liked what I found most helpful in the internet was lectures, like folks doing lectures and things. So instead of having to travel to see someone
I
speak,
was
I
into
could
the
see
like the
their.
TED Talk stuff until they got into like the supporting pedophilia. Have you seen that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I know.
That
And I
it's
think that
a
that's.
the preference or whatever. They had that whole. They had a whole like poster board they put out supporting this, and then they redacted on it. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's something you showed who you were right then and there, regardless if you took it down or not. You showed me who you were, and I'm done watching anything you have to say. Like,
And that's unfortunate too, because there's a lot of great TED Talks out
mm-hmm.
there, but I mean, at a certain point, you gotta call a spade. Like, look, what you're doing is wrong, and if this is the kind of content you're gonna put out there,
It's kind of
I
like
mean,
Netflix though, where they had those like little girls dancing on stage, right? It's like, how do
yeah,
you
cuties, I think it was something like
cuties?
that.
Yeah, that was insane. Like, and then they banned it, right? But then they put it back.
I mean, I still, I mean, okay, and because I'm a film lover and I love film and I love studying film and watching it and analyzing it, I have to keep telling myself and reminding myself that there are tens of thousands of people that work on one movie to bring it to the screen. And 95% of the people that work on a movie are straight as an arrow, hardworking, decent people. It's that 5%, you know, the producers, directors, and actors and stuff that work on a film that are the perverts pushing, you know, an agenda or whatever. Like, you know, there's a site called uh, Crazy Days and Nights, and it's people in the film industry who are anonymously dropping information, no names, just dates and people and certain things to put together on your own to figure it out. And these are people who work in the industry who are, they just want to make art. They just want to create, you know, these, you know, they're set designers, makeup artists. They're all kinds of people who are decent people. They just want to do something fun and cool and entertain the world. But, you know, all the focus gets put on that 5% of the people, you know what I mean? Rather than, you know, people shit all over Hollywood. It's like, look, Hollywood's made up of a lot of people who are just hard workers and making movies. They're not, you know, elite pedophiles. It's the
Not all of
upper,
them, but there's the upper
the
circle.
5% at the top, the producers, directors, and actors sometimes. And it's not even all of those. It's just a portion of them. So, separating those people, those artists from that, you know, that 5%, you have to remember that those people, they just want a job. They just want to go and do what they think is cool and fun. And I'm sure it is a lot of
The New
fun.
World Order has a lot of power, but they're not nearly as much power and control as we think they are. That's my opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we
Well,
have individually and collectively way more power than we know, and that's
well,
my opinion.
there's only a few 100,000 people in this world that are causing problems for billions of us. You know, and you know, if we could just
Get
rid
their names
ourselves,
all on a list,
yeah.
and I can't really say what I would do next, but
Well, yeah, I mean, I just think that if you remove those people and their control and power structures, you know, and allow people to just be free again, you know, you're gonna get a lot of happy people, and families would be better off, and you know, um, society as a whole would just be further ahead than we are now. So I agree.
you
Um,
got any thing else you want to talk about tonight? Did you write anything down? We've been an hour and a half.
yeah, I was just gonna say we should cut it here, and then so if you want to stop recording here, we'll just say goodbye to everyone. Thanks for watching and listening,
Yeah,
and we'll
remember
see
to
you again.
like, comment, share, whatever. We need as much help with traffic as possible. I'll be dropping this every Wednesday morning at 5 a.m. CST. We'll be doing a chit chat. If you want to be a guest, if you've got a long truther past, please message one of us and feel free to come on.
Absolutely, yes. Thanks again for watching, folks.
Yep, here, turn it off.